As we prepare to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Masonic Temple's dedication, let us remember the extraordinary efforts of the Pennsylvania Masons who overcame daunting financial risks and unforeseen impediments on site so that we and our successors might enjoy the splendor of its architecture, seek to understand and be impressed by the signification of its symbolism, and marvel at the richness of the collections preserved and displayed within. Although only about 10 years old, in 1865, Grand Lodge began to question the suitability of the Chestnut Street Masonic Hall. In June 1865, Grand Master Lucius H. Scott remarked, "Now that we have expended so large a sum in altering and adorning the hall, to say nothing of other and perhaps equally gigantic improvements which are now or may become hereafter imperative, does it come up to the requirements of each or any member of the order? Does it minister to the legitimate wants and comforts of an institution such as ours is or ought to be? Is it ornamentally or practically calculated to satisfy the reasonable desires of any considerable majority of the craft, if indeed to any individual member?" There were three primary complaints with the Chestnut Street Masonic Hall. It lacked sufficient space for lodge purposes, the basement flooded, and there were commercial and residential tenants on the property. On September 4th, 1865, Grand Lodge appointed a committee to find a building lot suitable for the erection of a hall commensurate with the wants of the fraternity, noting that no building would be suited in detail to all the wants of the society without having every part of it, from turret to foundation stone, appropriated to the distinct purposes of the order. For the rest of 1865 and throughout 1866, the appointed committee investigated possible sites throughout the city. In December 1866, on the committee's recommendation, Grand Lodge approved the purchase of the present site of our Masonic Temple at a price not exceeding $155,000. Grand Lodge completed the purchase in early 1867 for a total of $153,000, setting aside the $2,000 difference to demolish existing structures and make other improvements on the site. The Finance Committee had reservations. Chairman and past Grand Master Brother James Page remarked that the lot was far superior to any other in the city, both in the beauty of its location and in the facility of its approach, and that it hoped the Grand Lodge would erect thereon a beautiful and lasting monument to the grandeur and munificence of the order, but forewarned that, with only our present surplus receipts, it would be folly to encounter the heavy liabilities which will accrue from such a building as a craft will expect and would be creditable to our great order. To fund construction, Grand Lodge authorized the Finance Committee to issue bonds paying 6% interest. Although below market, the laws of the time prohibited private associations from issuing debt at an interest rate greater than 6%. Grand Lodge also authorized the Finance Committee to mortgage the Chestnut Street Hall, if necessary, as collateral for the repayment of the bonds. Meanwhile, the Building Committee requested proposals from some of the most skillful architects to furnish plans, specifications, and estimates for the new Masonic Temple. On December 27, 1867, on the recommendation of the Building Committee, Grand Lodge selected the plan received from the relatively unknown architect, Brother James H. Windrum. Grand Master Richard Vaux gave his enthusiastic approval for the project.
It was a unanimous declaration of the craft in Pennsylvania that such an edifice should be built as would be in harmony with the history, character, increasing influence, and high position of Freemasonry in Pennsylvania. The subordinate lodges have cheerfully consented to contribute all that has been asked of them for this purpose. Let us have then a new temple for Pennsylvania, which expresses in the language of architecture the historic origin of our order. Let it be in entire harmony with its hoary antiquity. Make it the ark of safety for our esoteric mysteries, which since the earliest of days have proved the fraternity to be their only custodian, preserver, protector, and teacher. Let us have a temple on which the student, the scholar, and the craftsman from all nations and of all tongues may look and learn its purpose and understand its origin, proclaimed by every word of its architectural language from porch to pinnacle.
But not all Pennsylvania Masons supported the decision to build a new Masonic Temple. At the time, many other Grand Lodges were establishing homes to care for their poor and destitute members and their wives, widows, and orphan children. A group of Pennsylvania Masons who were upset by Grand Lodge's decision to move forward with the new Masonic Temple instead of such a home would separately form and operate the Masonic Home of Pennsylvania further north on North Broad Street. Grand Lodge's great optimism faded to skepticism in the first half of 1868. Despite the appeals of Grand Master Vaux, the below-market 6% bonds were not received well by Pennsylvania Masons and lodges. Meanwhile, the building committee was consumed with landlord-tenant disputes that impeded the demolition and excavation work. Construction was already behind schedule, and adequate funding for the project had not materialized. Nevertheless, the cornerstone was laid on June 24, 1868, with impressive ceremony. Grand Master Richard Vaux addressed those gathered.
Our ceremonies are not novelties to dazzle or deceive. They are not intended neither to gratify pride nor manifest power. We have not the right to change or alter them. The temple we propose to erect is to be devoted to our ceremonial and symbolic rites and mysteries, guarded by the science of architecture, the wisdom of the ages, the virtue of purity in heart, the unselfishness of charity, the obedience of faith, the silence of reverence, the strength of unity, and the unbroken promises of God. It will stand as a refuge and a fortress of the craft, like a great rock in a weary land. In its hallowed enclosure, the light of masonry will ever illumine those who seek virtue and knowledge. The profane, the schismatic, and the agitator can never defile it, for to them its doors are barred by those virtues they neither appreciate nor comprehend. Selfishness is so abashed by the sublime rebuke of an unostentatious benevolence that it fails in the arrogance which else would nerve it to seek an entrance through its guarded portals. Within this temple, our successors will assemble to work the same work we have performed as our fathers before us have done in their day and generation.
To save money, the plans for the exterior were revised to substitute granite for marble. Still, the Finance Committee urged the Building Committee to immediately cease contracting new liabilities. Undeterred, just days later, the Building Committee contracted for the supply of Cape Ann Quincy granite for the Broad and Filbert Street fronts, and Fox Island granite for the Juniper and Cuthbert Street fronts. There were several more setbacks on site which further delayed the scheduled work. The most severe delays were caused by problems with the foundation for the main tower. Due to the immense weight of this prominent feature, the architect recommended setting the foundation at water gravel, which was estimated to be reached at a depth of 18 feet. Once excavated, it was found that the water gravel at 18 feet was only 2 or 3 feet thick, underneath of which was a 10 to 12 foot stratum of sand and clay, the worst kind of quicksand. Regular downpours impeded excavation, filling the foundation hole with water, which caused the walls to cave in on several occasions. Large pumps were brought in to keep the site sufficiently free from water to lay the foundation, which was ultimately set at the depth of 31 feet. There were also delays caused by disputes with the quarry supplying the exterior granite. Cold, wet weather had put an early end to active building operations until the spring of 1869. Although the construction schedule anticipated the exterior walls to be complete, only the foundation was finished. It was December 1868. Construction was behind schedule and over budget, and the 6% bonds were not marketable. Grand Lodge had a negative balance in the building fund. 2 members of the building committee resigned, including the chairman. The Grand Master filled the vacancies and made Samuel C. Perkins, the Right Worshipful Junior Grand Warden, chairman. Brother John Bolt, who so ably served Grand Lodge as superintendent of the Chestnut Street Masonic Hall and was responsible for the day-to-day oversight of the construction of the new Masonic Temple, was forced to retire due to health concerns. 1869 was a pivotal year, marked by a heated debate on the floor of Grand Lodge, a passionate plea to persevere, and the effective use of Grand Lodge's political capital. Having grave reservations concerning the ability to fund construction, Brother James Page, as chairman of the Finance Committee, begged Grand Lodge to secure the site of the new Masonic Temple, square up the work, and put the property and the adjacent streets and sidewalks in a good and safe condition. Surprised by the request, Grand Lodge tabled consideration of the resolution for 1 month. On April 7, 1869, at a special communication of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, Brother Perkins, on behalf of the building committee, gave an impassioned rebuttal.
The action of the Finance Committee contemplates an immediate and abrupt cessation of all operations upon the new Masonic Temple, except so far as may be necessary to use up the material now on or adjacent to the new temple, square up the work, and put the property and the adjacent streets and sidewalks in a good and safe condition, and preserve the work thus far completed. Is it beyond the power and resources of the Grand Lodge to sustain this building committee in carrying out the plans and purposes of the Grand Lodge for this year at least? The undertaking was first breached in September 1865, 3.5 years ago, and no step has been taken hurriedly. Has the Grand Lodge been acting blindly, unadvisedly, inconsiderately, heedlessly, without forethought, without reflection, running stupidly, headlong, regardless of the future during this 3.5 years? Such is the virtual, unmistakable, downright admission, if we now stop short, abruptly bringing the whole work to a standstill. It is an acknowledged, open, avowed, and deliberate suicide, and not a dollar will be contributed to wake up the dry bones thus heaped to life again. But the contrary is the fact. The whole subject has been carefully and thoroughly discussed, and the action of the Grand Lodge has been marked by a not to be misunderstood uniformity and unanimity in pressing steadily forward to the accomplishment of this cherished purpose of the brethren. There are doubtless many of the brethren who would be glad to contribute according to their means of this cherished enterprise, not capitalists, but the mass of the fraternity, who would be proud to possess a certificate showing their individual interests and evidencing to their own eyes and those of their families their personal identity and quasi-ownership to a degree in the noble structure, in its massive and solid proportions, that will be at once an ornament to the city, an enduring monument to the dignity and power of the Grand Lodge and of the eternal principles of the fraternity under the whole canopy of heaven. It is not to be overlooked that the progress of this work to its finest achievement must attract many to the fraternity whose dignity, power, and importance will be thus evidenced. The Masonic fraternity is not a mere charitable or beneficial association in the sense of pecuniary necessities. The foundations of Masonry are nobler and more lasting, deep-rooted in the higher developments of human nature. The increase of applications must compel an advance, and the prerequisites for admission to subordinate lodges a more jealous supervision, and a greater pecuniary requirement will absolutely be necessary, and the annual dues now but a trifle, will be cheerfully and of necessity advanced to meet the demands with a just regard to the welfare and dignity of the fraternity as it will justify. The rents of the new rooms in the temple, with the increased advantages and privileges, will be there and available to every brother, cannot and will not be expected to be at the same low rates which prevail in the present hall. And the annual income from the Grand Lodge from this source alone, in view especially of the undoubted increase in the number of lodges and members, will be ample with its other sources of revenues to meet the interest on this loan. The new temple will be the pride of the fraternity throughout the state. Hither they will come up, as did the ancient Jews to the temple at Jerusalem, 3, yea, even 4 times a year. And strangers, yet brethren, from all parts of this country and of the world will throng its portals and offer grateful incense at its altars. Brethren, shall the White Worshipful Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, in view of her past record on this subject, calling to mind especially the gorgeous and impressive and solemn ceremonies which only a few months since, on St. John the Baptist's Day, the cornerstone of this edifice was laid, suddenly, abruptly cease all our work, cover up all that has already been done, bury, as it were, our dead out of sight to await a hopeless resurrection? Who will contribute anything to the building fund if they have to reflect upon a vast, ghastly expanse of timber hiding from view the buried foundations of the new temple? We shall be the laughing stock of the fraternity and of the world. The faith, credit, wisdom, the reliability of the Grand Lodge, now so preeminent, now so established, will vanish. We have funds ample to go on, gradually but surely. As the solid and enduring granite of the walls rise course after course before the eyes of the fraternity, confidence will be established. A new ardor will inspire every brother's heart and animate every lodge throughout this jurisdiction. And an earnest longing will spring up to become thoroughly identified with the understanding by the contribution of the means which shall ensure its completion according to the plan proposed and in the time proposed. For years to come, so vast and extensive edifice must present abundant opportunity for embellishment and beautification. Long after those who witness the laying of the cornerstone and may witness the placing of the copestone with praise and rejoicing shall have passed from the land of the living. We cannot, we must not stop. However slow, however gradual shall be our progress, let it be steady and ever onward.
While Brother Perkins won the hearts and minds of the membership on the floor of Grand Lodge, Grand Master Vaux, a prominent lawyer and former mayor of Philadelphia, worked behind the scenes to successfully lobby for new legislation that allowed Grand Lodge to increase the interest rates on its bonds to any rate not exceeding 8%. Grand Lodge could now compete favorably with other securities available in the market. The Finance Committee promptly prepared new bonds that paid interest at the rate of 7.3%. All bonds issued by Grand Lodge were secured only by its good faith and credit. Although authorized to do so, Grand Lodge never pledged or mortgaged either the new site or the Chestnut Street Hall as collateral. Through December 1869, subscriptions for the new 7.3% bonds totaled more than $150,000, closing the gap in the 1869 construction budget. But construction was still far behind schedule. Only the first and second floors had been laid, and the interior and exterior walls had only been carried up to the first string course. The building committee set an ambitious goal for 1870, have the structure under roof by the closing of the building season. In his last address as Grand Master, Brother Vaux remarked that it was the symbology tied to the building that would leave its mark throughout the ages, and asked that continued care be taken with respect to the symbolism of the architectural ornamentation. After being installed as Grand Master, Brother Robert A. Lamberton immediately took up the reins of his predecessor and recommended that the members and subordinate lodges consider purchasing the new 7.3% bonds.
As it has been eloquently said of that grand old temple that gleamed from the brow of Moriah, there were gifts from all climes and treasures from all lands. As the Tyrian gave his purple and the Canaanite his toil, as Lebanon yielded its cedars and Ophir its gold to honor the abode of divine majesty, so let it be said of ours, that in its building and adornment are brethren scattered all over this broad commonwealth, in the cities and the towns, in the valleys and among the mountains, from the Delaware to Lake Erie, bore a willing and generous part. It is for them and their children who shall rise up to take their places. It will be a fit place in which to rear the Masonic altar and to practice and teach the Masonic rites and mysteries.
The spring and summer of 1870 saw the work advancing rapidly and successfully without accident or delay. The granite had been set to approximately 1/2 the height of the second story, and the cross walls of the interior were brought up to a corresponding height. The original design of the Broad Street front incorporated many different orders of architecture. In the summer of 1870, Grand Lodge reworked the design to be consistent with the rest of the building, which was in the pure Norman style, to make it as a whole, as a unit, one beautiful symbol of the massive, unchangeable, uniform, consistent harmony and stability of the fraternity. Despite the steady progress, the structure was not under roof by winter as planned. Moreover, the sale of the 7.3% bonds slowed, and there was an urgent call from Grand Master Lamberton to fund the construction budget for 1871.
Inasmuch as Masonic Creed teaches us that when Masons undertake any laudable object, they invariably go hand in hand, is it too much to expect that the brethren will, with one accord, put their shoulders to the wheel, and by loans of $25, $50, $75, or $100, furnish such a fund during the winter as will warrant the building committee to resume operations in early spring?
Fearing that private bond subscriptions would be insufficient to fund construction, the Finance Committee considered the following options: either mortgage the Chestnut Street Hall or engage a broker to place the bonds on the public market. The Finance Committee also established a sinking fund to begin saving money for the ultimate redemption of the 6% and 7.3% bonds. The sinking fund would receive the proceeds from a temporary increase in membership dues. The increase was greater for subordinate lodges meeting in the city of Philadelphia and would be decreased when the debt was paid down to $500,000 and eliminated upon full satisfaction of the bonds. The building committee made steady progress during 1871, and the roof was finally installed in the early summer. At the end of the 1871 building season, the only significant exterior work remaining was the completion of the main tower and the construction of the small tower and the Broad Street entrance. With the roof installed, finishing work on the interior continued through the winter, with carpenters, plasterers, and mechanical contractors fully engaged on site. The building committee was still pushing to have the building ready for dedication on St. John the Baptist's Day in June of 1873. The Finance Committee engaged a broker to list the bonds, the 7.3% bonds, for public sale. The brokerage commission was set at 1.5%. The bonds were first traded publicly on December 6, 1871, and were quickly fully subscribed. Grand Master Lamberton remarked,
The unbounded confidence of capitalists in the integrity and ability of the Grand Lodge as exhibited in the rapid absorption of so much of the loan as your Finance Committee felt justified in placing upon the market at this time, was most gratifying to them and complimentary to the fraternity, and evinces a degree of confidence in the credit of Masonic institutions scarcely to have been expected from the outside world.
The City of Philadelphia threw Grand Lodge a curveball in 1871 by proposing plans for 4 public buildings to be constructed on Penn Square, just south of the new Masonic Temple. The building committee expressed its frustration.
Your committee was appointed some years ago to select a site apart from business, central, easy of access yet isolated, being surrounded by 4 streets, as a fitting location for the peculiar purpose of erecting a temple for Masons for all time. This exclusion from neighboring or adjoining property was so thoroughly impressed and deemed so necessary by said committee that the decision was further held that the building itself must be reserved solely for Masonic use, regardless of any revenues that might be received with association with neighbor or business location or otherwise. No site offered the peculiar advantages of public and open location, yet seclusion from its surroundings, so well adapted for the purpose as that selected in which we now hope to occupy. The apparent location of public buildings, as evident by the excavation now in progress, infringes at once upon the privacy of position most desirable, and which so earnestly and as was hoped, so successfully sought. In the location of public buildings upon Penn Square, your committee feels not only serious disappointment, but as if they had been deceived, relying upon these squares to be and remain an open space forever, or if ever built upon, that they would have been devoted to temples dedicated to science and the arts. Could we have presumed that our reasoning would have been proved wrong in the choice of location? From the surroundings to which we now apparently are to be subjected, we feel satisfied that some other place would have been chosen for the site of our new temple. With the knowledge of these evils, at an earlier period, your committee would certainly have advocated greater simplicity and economized upon the labor and material of the exterior of the building, for what we have done will to a great extent be obscured. And we cannot but deprecate the location of public buildings in so close proximity to one another, of the character of the new temple, that the expenditures now sought for the new adornment and beauty of each will be in large measure rendered nugatory, for these must inevitably materially injure each other. This is clear when we adjoin the proposed public buildings with one building, but they appear to repeat the evil upon themselves 4 times. Your committee does not think it is too late to have this injury stayed, and would earnestly recommend that this subject be brought before the Grand Lodge for consideration and action. And if the public buildings cannot be prevented from being placed at all on Penn Square, by action of the legislature, which your committee hope may be done, that the commissions for their erection may have the location and plan of the buildings changed, so as to give us a part in the relief desired. Your committee would prefer one building upon the intersection on account of the space gained by this position, say 205 feet between such building and the new Masonic Temple.
Acknowledging that the construction of City Hall was inevitable, Grand Lodge used its influence to negotiate the consolidation of the proposed 4 separate buildings into one building to be erected in the center of Penn Square, preserving in part the view and stature of the Masonic Temple on approach from all directions. Things went well during 1872. Breathing a sigh of relief, Brother Perkins, on behalf of the building committee, confidently reported,
to have been a member of the fraternity, which has inaugurated and carried on the new Masonic Temple now being erected by the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, is to be identified with one of the greatest work ever carried on by Masons in any part of the world or in any age of its history, and the erection of a new temple of such grandeur and magnitude by voluntary subscriptions dependent solely upon the good faith of Masons for ultimate redemption, to be devoted solely to Masonic purposes, while exciting our wonder and admiration, also marks an era in the history of the fraternity to which the future historian cannot fail to do full and impartial justice.
Nevertheless, the building committee realized that enough work remained that it would have to postpone the dedication from St. John the Baptist Day in June of 1873 until late September of 1873. The public offering of the bonds was so successful that the Finance Committee discontinued the offering to allow Pennsylvania Masons and Masonic organizations to fund the remainder of the capital requirements through direct purchases of the bonds. In addition, the Finance Committee exchanged all the 6% bonds for 7.3% bonds to put all creditors on equal footing. In the fall of 1872, the Grand Lodge placed the Chestnut Street Hall on the market. Although marketed for quick sale, the financial panic of 1873 would delay its ultimate disposition until 1877. Without the anticipated proceeds from the sale of the Chestnut Street Hall, Grand Lodge started to collect rents from lodges quarterly rather than annually, so that it could pay the semi-annual interest payments on the bonds. At the beginning of 1873, the building fund had only $7,119.28 on hand. The financial panic made it difficult to raise funds solely from Masonic sources. Consequently, the Finance Committee once again listed the bonds for sale on the public markets. In all, the building committee had received a total of $1,566,913, of which $1,385,425 was from the issuance of the new Masonic Temple bonds. $35,545 was from interest earned on temporary investments, and $1,257 was from the sale of old materials. It had expended a total of $1,559,794, of which $156,793 was for the lot and site improvements. $1,390,018 was for construction and construction-related expenses. $9,061 was for interest payable to the Grand Treasurer. $3,750 was for brokerage commissions, and $171 was for trust-related expenses. The Grand Lodge Charity Fund, the Stephen Girard Trust, and the Grand Lodge Sinking Fund all invested in the bonds. So did the Grand Chapter of Pennsylvania, 52 subordinate lodges, 20 Mark Lodges, chapters, and encampments, 42 lodges of so-called kindred societies, such as the International Order of the Oddfellows, and 330 individuals, including 88 women and 218 men. Two of the three largest individual investors and many other investors were men not associated with the Masonic fraternity. The single largest investor was the Penn Mutual Life Insurance Company. Progress was steady through 1873. Construction was substantially complete by the middle of September, just in time for its dedication on September 26, 1873. Brother Perkins, now Grand Master, arranged for and presided over the ceremonies. He expressed his hopes.
This temple may long stand as a monument of the strength, stability, prosperity, and energy of the craft in Pennsylvania, and that enriched from time to time as opportunity and resources may allow, with decorative adornments and works of art, it may become more beautiful and attractive from year to year, and as a center and home for the association of the craft to cluster about, with cheering memories of pleasure and profit had within its walls.
With the addition of punch list items completed after the dedication, the total cost of construction was $1,567,725, including lot acquisition and site improvement expenses. Following the dedication, the Grand Lodge set about adorning the interior of the Masonic Temple, a methodic process that took more than 20 years and in many ways continues to this day. To help with the work, the Grand Lodge created the Art Association of the Masonic Temple of Philadelphia. Under the leadership of Brother Maxwell Somerville, the association was responsible for the purchase and repair of art to be displayed in and about the Masonic Temple. Even today, through a generous bequest, Brother Somerville continues to fund the repair and preservation of art in the Masonic Temple and the portraits of our Grand Masters. The Art Association seems to have ceased operations in the early 1880s, many years before Brother Somerville's death in 1904. Having been long forgotten by 1917, a curious Grand Master appointed a representative to look into the status of the association. After careful investigation, the representative responded, tongue-in-cheek, first, that so far as he has been able to learn, there has been no meeting of the association for nearly 30 years, unless it has been a spectral gathering of shades of deceased brethren, when all the lights in the temple were extinguished, and none but the spiritualists could appreciate the solemn deliberation of their silent session. Second, your representative possesses no mediumistic powers and could raise no spirits during the year. He cannot, therefore, report any meeting of the Art Association for the Masonic year now about to end, or give any resume of its recent work. At one time, long since, the association exercised a wide discretion in the purchase of artworks to be used in beautifying and adorning the temple. A cursory examination of some of the works of art skied in the basement will confirm the assertion of your representative that the association undoubtedly enjoyed great latitude of discretion, apparently without any check. Third, art is not neglected, although the Art Association is somnolent, if not defunct. An estimable old gentleman, a professor in the University of Pennsylvania, and a member of our ancient and honorable fraternity, left a legacy to Grand Lodge of $10,000 and provided that the income thereof should be used in repairing and restoring works of art in the temple and in the purchase of new works of art from time to time. Hence, as you pass through the second floor corridor of our temple, you will observe a beautiful marine view, on the frame of which is a small label, quite as large as good taste will permit, however, informing you that that picture was purchased and presented by the trustees of the Maxwell Somerville bequests. In this way, art becomes the post-mortem reminder of our dear departed professor. A funny side note, Brother Somerville also left a separate bequest known as the Maxwell Somerville Banquet Bequest, which has funded a banquet to be held each year on or around his birthday, a tradition which continues to this day. As the representative reported back in 1917, each year the trustees partake in an elaborate banquet on his birthday, on which occasion the trustees and their friends toast his memory and talk about him. He was wise enough to foresee that art alone would not be sufficient to keep the trustees interested, and evidently feared that some Grand Master would discover the ban in banquets, so he took time by the forelock and by testamentary disposition compelled an annual feed on his birthday. The new Masonic Temple bonds were fully paid off in 1908. Grand Lodge never failed to make a payment of interest or principal on time. Immediately upon paying off the new Masonic Temple bonds, Grand Lodge turned its focus to the establishment and construction of a home for the care of poor and destitute Masons and their wives, widows, and orphan children. On September 2nd, 1908, 35 years after dedicating the Masonic Temple, the Grand Master said, We should profit by the experience of our brethren who directed the building of the Masonic Temple. Their methods and procedures may be safely followed in full confidence that the proposed work is but the natural sequence of that which they so successfully undertook. With the Masonic Temple, the Masonic home will be an enduring monument of the dignity and power of Grand Lodge and the eternal principles of the fraternity under the whole canopy of heaven. In 1910, the Grand Lodge laid the cornerstone of the equally impressive and majestic Grand Lodge Hall on the campus of the new Masonic home at Elizabethtown. What about the rogue group of Masons that formed the Masonic Home of Pennsylvania back in 1871? Well, they continued to independently operate a home for Masons and their loved ones for nearly 140 years. They also operated the William L. Elkins Home for orphan girls for many years. In 2004, the Grand Lodge took ownership of the facility, which had moved from Philadelphia to Lafayette Hill, Montgomery County in the early 1970s. It is now operated by the Grand Lodge as the Masonic Village at Lafayette Hill. We have been good stewards of the Masonic Temple. We have kept the building and its mechanical apparatus in good condition and repair. We have shunned the fads that have caused other institutions with ornate buildings to paint over their murals and frescoes. We have preserved the artistic and symbolic significance of the Masonic Temple. We have overcome disturbances associated with the connection of the Pennsylvania and Reading railroads underneath the foundation and demolition and construction on adjacent properties. And most importantly, we still use the Masonic Temple for the Masonic purposes for which it was intended. I am grateful for the participation of Brother Joe Jensen, District Deputy Grand Master of Masonic District A, who played Brother Richard Vaux, Brother Matthew Dupay, the chairman of our Masonic Library Museum of Pennsylvania, who played Samuel C. Perkins, and Brother Mike Rowe, the executive director of our Masonic Village at Elizabethtown, who played Robert A. Lamberton.